Hey, folks, Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to a special Sunday edition of the Watchman Newscast live stream. You're probably wondering, man, what's been happening over the weekend, right after just a devastating week for Hezbollah? This was the worst week ever, I guess you could say, for the Iran-backed terror paramilitary group, Hezbollah. Dozens of top commanders, including their very top commander, Ibrahim Akil, eliminated by Israel over the past, not even a week, over the past 5 days. And of course, Operation Exploding Beeper, in which some 3,000 Hezbollah terrorists were seriously wounded, dozens more killed. Just an ingenious, unprecedented Israeli cyber attack, intelligence, covert operation there. And Israel pounding Hezbollah rocket launchers throughout Lebanon. Add it all up, and Hezbollah right now is in chaos, folks, complete disarray. And yet, Hezbollah is responding as I speak. You're wondering what happened. Last time I came to you was Friday. And I promised you on Friday afternoon, if anything develops over the weekend, we'll come to you here on the Watchman. And that's what we're doing because Hezbollah is responding. We knew it was coming, right? Dozens of rockets, missiles, and drones launched not only at northern Israel near that Lebanon border area, which sadly we've become accustomed to over the past 11 months, but deeper into Israel, into the Jezreel Valley, deep into northern Israel, really threatening even central Israel to a degree, and into Haifa as well. So certainly an escalation by Hezbollah in terms, again, of the distance, the depth of these rocket strikes over the past 48 hours. Thankfully, Israel has intercepted a good number of these incoming projectiles. We know a few people were wounded, running for shelter. Hundreds of thousands of Israelis over the past 48 hours, Saturday and Sunday, have had to take shelter as these Hezbollah rockets, especially in the past 24 hours or so, starting Saturday night Israel time and stretching into Sunday morning, they've come in waves, at least 4 very significant waves of these Hezbollah rockets. And it's not only rockets, there's drones as well. And they're not only coming from Hezbollah. You might say, what are you talking about? Folks, this is a key point. Over the past 24 hours, we have seen projectiles, in particular drones, being launched not from Lebanon, but from Iraq. A few dozen, according to the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces, projectiles have traveled from Iraq into Israel as well. And that's, of course, those Iranian-backed Shia militias which operate in Iraq. And remember, they're part of that ring of fire, that Iran-backed ring of fire that surrounds Israel on all sides. Shall we review? Gaza, where right now Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, the two Iranian proxies there, pretty much down for the count. Gaza is a ring that has now disappeared from that ring of fire. They cannot mount any sort of significant offensive against Israel like they did in the past, those Iran-backed terror groups in the Strip, as Israel continues to crush Hamas. So you've got Hezbollah, the crown jewel of Iran's proxies in southern Lebanon, which I've said is too big to fail in Iran's view, especially with Hamas and Islamic Jihad now gone by the wayside and in their death throes. Hezbollah's not only existence, but a strong Hezbollah becomes even more important for the Iranian regime. And then you've got, of course, the Houthis in Yemen, and you've got Syria, not only Iranian Hezbollah forces there, but the Assad regime in Syria, which gladly hosts them. And then you've got Iraq. And Iraqi Shia militias and the Houthis in Yemen have collaborated over the past few months with some of these barrages against Israel. So the question right now is, as Hezbollah is reeling, and folks, it's not just me saying it, it's not just Israel saying it. Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, gave a speech saying exactly that late last week, saying, look, we have suffered heavy blows. And that was before the IDF's takeout on Friday afternoon, September 20th, of Ibrahim Akil, Hezbollah's top overall commander, the leader of their Radwan force, that elite force that really is the tip of the spear for Hezbollah's military and terror operations. Not only was he killed, but practically all of the top commanders in the Radwan force were killed. On Friday afternoon, they were gathered in a basement in the southern suburbs of Beirut, underneath a residential building, and Israel struck. They were very unwisely gathered all in the same place. But in some ways, what choice do they have? I guess you could ask folks, because look, after Israel conducted this incredible operation on Tuesday and Wednesday last week, where you have thousands of pagers blowing up in the hands or on the belts of Hezbollah operatives, and hundreds of walkie-talkies, again, in the hands or on the belts of Hezbollah operatives. After that, I don't know which options are really left for them to communicate. Maybe carrier pigeon, maybe Pony Express, in all seriousness. So it's not a shock that they're saying, well, let's gather in person, not communicate on handheld devices or through any sort of technology, because Israel clearly has a mole inside the system, has tapped into our communication systems. And Hezbollah right now, paranoid and looking over their shoulders. So they think, well, we'll gather all in one place. This isn't wise, but the best place is old school face-to-face. Didn't work out so well for them. So they're in disarray. And again, if the premise today, and what do you think? Folks, we've got an incredible viewership from around the world joining us, thousands. Is Hezbollah too big to fail for Iran? That's a question I want to lay out to you early on here. What do you mean by that? Too big to fail, meaning if it looks like, look, we've seen Hamas and Islamic Jihad. They are devastated. They're not able to mount any sort of offensive against Israel or really chip in any meaningful way right now with the rocket barrages against Israel. They've been that depleted and that devastated over the past now nearly a year, since October 7th, 2023. Will Iran get involved directly if it feels that Hezbollah is about to meet the same fate as Hamas? Big question. Because remember, Hezbollah was Iran's insurance policy. What do I mean? Since July, August 2006, the last war between Israel and Hezbollah, prior obviously to October 8th of last year, when Hezbollah unilaterally, on its own, with no provocation from Israel, began firing rockets at northern Israel. Prior to that, for about 17 years, all was mostly quiet on the northern front. Iran has held Hezbollah in reserve for years. Why? I believe the main reason is as insurance against any Israeli strike against Iran's nuclear facilities. Iran's main method of responding to any Israeli strike against those nuke facilities would have been to unleash Hezbollah. That's in jeopardy now. Hezbollah has suffered, in their own words, in the words of Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, devastating, heavy blows. It's going to take a while for them to recover from this. But here's the bigger question. Will Israel give them the chance to recover, or will Israel press the advantage now, while Hezbollah is in complete disarray? Look, over the past 48 hours, you see the title of this live stream today. They're trading heavy blows, indeed. But prior to this week's stunning operations by Israel, I believe Hezbollah would have launched many more rockets with more lethal effect and possibly targeted civilian centers to a greater degree, until they didn't have the capability to. When the entire Radwan force is essentially wiped out, the top leadership of it, who would have planned such an assault, and when thousands of your foot soldiers are out of action, wounded, killed, at least 500 of them blind with eye wounds from the exploding pagers and walkie-talkies, according to reports from the region, many with gaping wounds in their, let's just say, lower extremities, because when you wear a pager, it's usually on your belt, in your pocket, or you're reading it, you get paged. I mentioned this on Friday. Growing up in Northeast Philly, we called it a beeper back in the day. I hadn't heard much about pagers in many moons, but this is what Hezbollah resorted to. because they were very paranoid and very nervous about Israel tapping their phone calls. Surprise, surprise. But they thought they were doing a wise thing to switch over to pagers. And again, it didn't work out so well. But in this state of disarray, does Israel press the advantage? Yes, trading heavy blows. And Hezbollah, yes, look, folks, Hezbollah has not unleashed its full arsenal yet. I don't want to, they're a very formidable foe. They're reeling right now, but they are still a formidable foe, no doubt. But I don't want to overhype it. I think many times when we talk about the enemies of Israel, the enemies of the West, it's always the same thing from the mainstream media and Western leftist diplomats. Don't go in, it's going to be a quagmire. You're going to get bogged down, it's going to be a disaster. And man, and they're pretty tough. We heard it after October 7th. Israel's going to invade Gaza. We must, after October 7th. We must crush Hamas once and for all so that something like this can never happen again. And you heard the doomsayers, oh, don't do it. They're going to bog you down. It's going to be a quagmire that you'll never get out of. Thousands of Israeli soldiers will be killed. You can't win, Israel. We heard that from segments even of the Israeli left and far left, I should say, in that country. But it's always this doom and gloom prediction. And then Israel strikes and strikes hard and unleashes hell on these demonic terror groups and shows what the IDF is made of, which is tough stuff. And the world says, oh, wow, maybe we underestimated tiny Israel. They're pretty darn tough and pretty effective and pretty brilliant in their operations and their covert operations. Now, I think we're seeing that now again. We play many, not I, but many have played Hezbollah up to be a 800-pound gorilla. And again, I'm not understating Hezbollah's capacities. Folks, they have the capacity, certainly. For decades, they've been building this up, courtesy of Iran. They've been building this up, the ability to attack Israel in a major way. I mean, they can reach every inch of Israel. I called it tiny Israel a minute ago. Helpful reminder, Israel is the size of the state of New Jersey. A place I know well because I grew up in Philly right next door, and I can tell you, you can travel Jersey in one day. In several hours, you can go from north to south. And you can do the same in Israel. About 8-9 hours, you can travel from Mount Hermon and ski on the slopes all the way down to Eilat and lay on the beach on the Red Sea in the same day. Hezbollah can reach every inch of Israel. They certainly have precision-guided munitions in their arsenals, PGMs for short, which do exactly what their name says. They're designed to hit a target with greater accuracy and greater precision. They have not unleashed their full capacities yet. Because I think now Iran is saying, wow, because again, Iran is the puppet master, the head of the snake. Hezbollah is an arm of the Iranian regime. They're not going to do anything without the blessing of their masters in Tehran. But I think Iran right now is saying, wow, Israel means business. And if we unleash Hezbollah's most lethal weaponry, then the IDF is going to hit us back 10 times as hard. And Israeli military and political leaders have made that point. You will learn. Today, the IDF chief of staff said, you will learn your lesson. I don't know that they will, short of a ground invasion, which no one wants to see, but which is probably the only way to decisively knock Hezbollah out and eliminate them as a threat to Israel. Speaking of ground invasions, and you saw the second part of this title, when that group of Radwan force terror cult leaders was killed south of Beirut on Friday, they were planning a ground invasion of northern Israel. I'm talking about the Galilee. I want to break that down in a minute. And I want your thoughts on that. It was basically a Hezbollah October 7 style assault that they were planning. And if you didn't think Israel would respond forcefully to that, that would have marked, I think Hezbollah has already signed its death warrant. It may not be for another year, but eventually it's going to come, the demise of Hezbollah. I don't see them being mentioned prophetically. That's another story. When you look at Gog, Magog, the Ezekiel war, you might say, what are you talking about? Well, this is a channel which is current events, breaking news from an unapologetically biblical perspective. We do believe that we're living in Bible times right now, prophetic times, and the prophetic chess pieces are moving on the board. If you like what you're hearing, we'd love for you to join us as subscribers here on the channel. Hey, we're coming to you most days, and we're coming to you live with, again, breaking news events and breaking down why it matters to you. Number one, no matter where you live in the world, because what happens in the Middle East does not stay in the Middle East, but also why it impacts and how it impacts the body of Christ. So we love you can subscribe, click the notification bell so you get alerts every time, even on a Sunday afternoon, every time a new video is posted, Sunday afternoon here in Texas, USA. And we're fast approaching 1 million subscribers. We're creeping up on 982,000 subscribers, which is very hard to believe. And we give all glory to God Almighty for such a time as this. He's just given us a favor here. And we thank all of you for being with us. We can't thank enough our watchmen and women on the wall. You guys are the best. And I always say the most educated audience on YouTube of all these channels, because the questions I get and the comments I see on our chats in the comment section, guys are some pretty smart people. And we're just honored to be able to bring you the news and current events, again, from an unapologetically bold and biblical perspective. So be sure to subscribe and, hey, continue to comment here in the chat. Let me know. We read your chats and we try to read. There's thousands upon thousands of comments. I'm a slightly busy guy, which is a good problem to have. I want to be busy doing the Lord's work. But we try to read everything that we can. And when you leave comments and you mention things in the chats, we say, wow, maybe that's something we should discuss. I like to say, you are our bosses, God and you. We like to say at our team that you're our bosses. You know, we want to bring you the kind of content that you want to know about. You want to know more about. So leave those comments. And I want to know more about what you think of a Hezbollah ground invasion. I hate to even say it. I shudder to think, right, in the wake of October 7th. But according to not only the Israeli military, but the president of Israel, Isaac Herzog, when Ibrahim Akil and these other top Radwan force leaders were eliminated on Friday by the IDF in that airstrike south of Beirut, they were planning an October 7th style invasion of northern Israel. They called it Operation Conquer the Galilee. Now, look, for years, Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah, the overall leader of Hezbollah, has threatened to do exactly that, to invade the Galilee, to invade northern Israel, and to do exactly what Hamas sadly achieved on October 7th when it invaded southern Israel, massacring people, seizing any Israeli intelligence or any valuable information they could find for their cause. And the main thing for them, taking hostages, kidnapping people, taking hostages back, dragging them back to Lebanon, holding them for ransom, and of course, attaining leverage, right? Look, without hostages, this campaign in Gaza would have been over in a week. Instead, it stretched on for 11 months, over 11 months, because there are still dozens of Israelis alive in the bowels of hell in Gaza, in tunnels someplace. And here's something to keep in mind. As Hezbollah right now is reeling and they're struggling, they're in disarray, and they're licking their wounds, Hezbollah may be saying, and again, I'm not trying to speak this into existence, anything like that, but we're analyzing what's happening, right? Hezbollah has successfully kidnapped Israelis in the past. As a matter of fact, its kidnapping of Israeli soldiers is what sparked the 2006 war between Israel and Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. I know the IDF's on the lookout for this, but I would not put it beyond Hezbollah to mount some sort of small ground incursion into Israel with the goal of kidnapping Israelis and dragging them back over the border. And all of a sudden, Hezbollah, which is on its heels right now, all of a sudden they have a little bit of leverage in their view because Israel wants to get the hostages back. So Israel cannot fall into that situation in the north. The bad news, good news, not good news, but there is the small fact that they're not so small fact that some 80,000 at least Israelis are evacuated from the north along that Lebanon border region. So if there's not a lot of civilians left to kidnap, then you have less of a chance of having that hostage situation. And sadly, there is not a lot of Israeli civilians left to kidnap in the north right now because they're evacuated. And that's why Israeli leaders now every day, military and political over the past week, have drilled this home that we will return the residents to the north, non-negotiable. And there's more heavy blows to come, according to Netanyahu, Israel's prime minister, just today. But there are Israeli soldiers near that border. And there's no greater prize for demonic Iran-backed terror organizations than being able to, God forbid, kill or kidnap an Israeli soldier. So certainly, folks, keep that in prayer, because prayer works, number one. And number two, this is a serious, serious threat. I continue to pray for a divine Iron Dome over Israel and God's hedge of protection over the soldiers in the trenches fighting, many of them reservists who have left their families for months on end. I know them personally. Think of our good friend Yair Pinto at TBN Israel, who was away from his family for months in Gaza, in Khan Yunis, fighting for his nation, fighting for his family. That's ultimately what they're doing. They're giving this incredible sacrifice to soldiers of the IDF because no one else is going to do it. Tiny country. Everyone's got to play a part in the defense of the country. It's incredibly admirable what Israelis do. You have 100,000 reservists called up right now. Again, these are guys many times in their 30s. They're not spring chickens, 18 years old, 19 years old. The guys' 30s, even their 40s, which is still young, by the way. I may be biased when I say that, but they're leaving their families, leaving little ones, and going into a hellish situation, into war. And they're doing it willingly because they know there's no other way. If they don't do it, there's no Israel. So they do it. So keep them in your prayers. And again, as Hezbollah plots and plans and schemes in the north. And look, Israel has certainly unleashed some tricks up its sleeve over the past week, no doubt. That left the whole world stunned, quite literally, not only Hezbollah. But you have to think Hezbollah and the Iranian regime have some tricks up their sleeve as well, I'm sad to say. These are not just some guys in a cave waving around AK-47s. They're cunning and wicked and smart and sly in that kind of way. So you haven't seen the last of them, although they're certainly reeling right now. So keep that all in prayer. And a reminder, as we get into the Galilee equation, that invasion angle in a second, we're going to talk about that more. I didn't mention at the top, but I should have, maybe a little more strongly. Yes, Hezbollah has launched dozens, over 100 in the past 48 hours of rockets at deeper points into northern Israel, the Jezreel Valley, Haifa. Israel has responded. Just so you know, they're not sitting on their hands. Israel has carried out waves of airstrikes as well in response, striking Hezbollah rocket launchers. So again, it's kind of a tit for tat over the past 48 hours, but Israel is certainly not standing pat. They're striking as well. And another thing to mention before we unpack the Galilee equation a little bit more, these drones, some came from Iraq. I mentioned that at the top, but are we getting to a point? I think we're seeing, number one, Iran trying to relieve some pressure on Hezbollah. I would not be surprised if the Houthis get involved again as well. Last we heard from the Houthis, a little over a week ago, they launched a ballistic missile at central Israel. Thankfully, that missile was intercepted about a week ago, a little over a week ago. So thankfully, that missile was intercepted last Saturday. But the Houthis will likely not remain silent in this. I would not be shocked if Iran activates the Houthis to a greater degree, activates more in Iraq and out of Syria. Again, trying to alleviate some of the pressure on Hezbollah in Lebanon. You got a few rings on that ring of fire. And you notice I didn't mention, again, that they're going to call on Hamas or Islamic Jihad to get involved, because that ring has been whittled away. And in the past, Iran could always call on Hamas and Islamic Jihad to stir things up. They were a thorn in Israel's side. Every few months, Iran could nudge Hamas or Islamic Jihad in Gaza, and say, hey, fire a few hundred rockets and harass Israel. And they did it. And now they can't. On October 7th, they signed their own death warrant. Did Hamas and Islamic Jihad. And I believe Hezbollah has as well. It may not be as quick, their demise, as Hamas, or maybe it is. No one knows what Israel's planning right now. Is Israel's goal right now to get Hezbollah, to batter Hezbollah to the point where Hezbollah is begging for a ceasefire, which seems unlikely. Not that they won't batter Hezbollah, but that Hezbollah and Iran would grovel for a ceasefire and willingly, on their own accord, essentially, back up those 18 miles from the Israel-Lebanon border beyond the Litani River. That seems unlikely to me. Seems like they're going to have to be beat into submission, quite frankly. So that seems very unlikely to me that Hezbollah would do that. But what's the goal for Israel? Is that the goal, just to get a ceasefire, which again I think is unlikely, or is the goal to crush Hezbollah? And what factor, if any, does the November election in the United States play? Obviously, if Donald Trump wins, he gets inaugurated January 20th, I believe, 21st. If Trump wins, you have a much friendlier administration who would be much more amenable to Israel unleashing hell on Hezbollah and Iran and the other proxies. The Biden administration continues to try to restrain Israel throughout this entire process. And just the weak, craven, mixed messaging coming from this administration in D.C. right now, where they're saying, well, we're not sad to see these Hezbollah terrorists killed. They were bad guys. But we don't want escalation. Israel, you're escalating. Again, it's the schizophrenic policy where we back Israel, but Israel, don't you dare go into Rafah. Israel, don't you dare go into Lebanon. Israel, don't you dare strike Iran. So it's a message ultimately of weakness and appeasement, and the Biden White House restraining Israel, and Israel essentially in many cases over the past 11 months fighting with one arm tied behind its back. And that's a sad fact. But again, Israel, don't escalate, even though Ibrahim Akil, as we laid out who he was exactly, folks, this Radwan Force commander, the head of Hezbollah's Jihad Council, who was taken out on Friday, September 20th, by Israel. He had a $7 million bounty on his head from the United States. He was one of the most wanted men in the world, and certainly by the United States. $7 million reward for his capture or killing, I'm sure. Will Israel be sent a check for $7 million? Interesting question. Why? He was involved in the 1983 U.S. Marine barracks bombing, which killed 243 brave U.S. soldiers, and also involved in the bombing of the U.S. Embassy in Lebanon back in 83. He was an evil man, and now he's gone. And the U.S. should be talking about that, U.S. officials thanking Israel, who eliminated an avowed enemy of the United States with loads of American blood on his hands. Instead, the messaging is, well, he was a bad guy, but we don't want to escalate. Be careful, Israel. You're straying off the reservation here. Well, I think Israel, it seems, is at the point with Hezbollah where they're saying, you know what? We can't get people back home unless we unleash hell on Hezbollah. The tit-for-tat stuff isn't working. The proportionate response stuff isn't working. Hezbollah's not getting the memo. So it's time for us to take drastic measures. Because, folks, I've said it before and I'll say it again. You cannot have at least 80,000 people. You're a country of 10 million people, about 7 million Jews. You can't have 80,000 of them in a tiny nation the size of the state of New Jersey, evacuated for the better part of a year, living out of suitcases in hotels scattered around the country. You can't have an entire region, the north of Israel, an entire region of your country effectively a ghost town and inactive. You've already got parts of southern Israel around the Gaza border, still evacuated as well, although some are trickling home. You can't afford that. You can't sustain that. No nation, especially not a nation as tiny as Israel, could sustain that. I'm here in the United States. That's like having a chunk of Texas along the Mexico border evacuated for a year, or Minnesota evacuated along the Canada border for a year. You can't do it. Eventually, you're going to feel that economically in many, many ways. It's unsustainable. And above all, it hurts morale. It hurts psychologically. But what hurts even more is the prospect for the residents of the North to return home to Hezbollah in still full force, at least on the border, perched on the border still. No one would return home to that, especially because, look, they were just planning on Friday afternoon when they were taking out members of Hezbollah's Radwan force. They were literally planning to invade northern Israel and invade the Galilee and carry out an October 7th style massacre in Israel, northern Israel. So call me crazy, but the residents of northern Israel are probably not in a rush to get home right now if Hezbollah is still upon the border, staring down the barrel at them across the border in Lebanon. And I've been on that border many, many times. And I love those beautiful communities in northern Israel. Folks, I can tell you that southern Lebanon is, the homes have been taken, commandeered by Hezbollah. They live there. Hezbollah fighters not only fight there in southern Lebanon and carry out Hezbollah operations, they live there. It's a beautiful area. You look out into Lebanon when you stand on the north in Israel, you look out, it looks so beautiful, so serene. And then lurking in those houses are Hezbollah rockets and Hezbollah fighters staring back at you. And I know, because I've been on that border and been photographed by Hezbollah terrorists along with the IDF. The IDF said, there they are. They stand on the border and they take pictures of it as an intimidation tactic. So I'm pretty certain that the residents of northern Israel who evacuated don't want to go back and have their pictures taken by Hezbollah every day. And not only that, have rockets on launchers across the border from them. It's unsustainable. I will say, I asked a question earlier, if Hezbollah were to mount some kind of invasion of Israel, October 7th style, seize the Galilee, they're signing their death warrant. Do they underestimate Israel? After the way Israel crushed Hamas, it still seems that they underestimate Israel. Do they really think Hezbollah, if they carried out an October 7th style massacre in Israel, do they really think Israel wouldn't crush them decisively? There'd be no other conversation had. And Israel would tell the world, go pound sand. It's over now. Or is Hezbollah thinking, we'll invade, and like I said earlier, kidnap Israelis, kidnap soldiers, hold them for ransom, and all of a sudden we've got leverage. Maybe that's the grander plan. But we pray that God foils all of those plans. And I think of Psalm 2, where it says, I'm paraphrasing, but God hears and he sees the plots, the plans, the schemes of Israel's enemies, and he laughs. God quite literally laughs and says, what are you thinking? Do you really think I'm going to allow this? That my anointed, the land I've chosen, I'm going to allow it to be destroyed? I've made eternal promises to this nation and this people. You may not like it, but I chose them. And I made eternal promises to them. Everlasting is a word used often in the Bible when it talks about the covenant between God and Israel. It's an everlasting covenant. What part of everlasting don't you understand? I say to the enemies of Israel. And look, God's a very big God. He can have a mighty plan for Israel and a mighty plan for the body of Christ, the church. The two are not mutually exclusive. Again, he's a very big God. And he's got a great plan for Israel. He's going to pour out his spirit on that land. Read Romans. Read what Paul says in Romans 10, 11, 12, and read beyond that. But Romans is a great place to start about what the future holds for Israel. And he's got an awesome plan for the body of Christ, for his church. So keep that in mind and be encouraged. And by the way, if you like what you're hearing, you want to hear more like this, two things. Number one, we've got a nightly show on TBN, the world's largest Christian television network. We just launched in March. It's called Stakelbeck Tonight. every weeknight, Monday through Friday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, with a re-air at 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We are on TBN every night, Monday through Friday, hard hitting, and all the footage and maps and B-roll and the bells and whistles that you can't really do during a live stream on YouTube, you can certainly do on broadcasts, and you can watch on the big screen. And we love what we're doing on the show. We encourage you to tune in. We'd love you to watch us. Great interviews from around the world, from Israel, some of the top voices that you'll recognize on the show on a regular basis. Our good friend Yair Pinto, regular correspondent, on every week with us. So check it out, 10:30 p.m., 7:30 p.m., re-air at 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time on TBN every Monday through Friday. And we've got the Stakelbeck Tonight YouTube channel. Yeah, we have a second YouTube channel. We're very busy. At Stakelbeck Tonight, that's at Stakelbeck Tonight. A lot of prophetic content there, which I think you'll like. A lot of history, archaeology, at Stakelbeck Tonight right here on YouTube. Last thing, if you are a loyal viewer of the channel, you love what we do here, you can be a premium member. Now, subscribe, absolutely free. You don't have to be a premium member, but we offer that for folks who want to go a little deeper with us. We're having a premium live stream. We do this once a month for our premium members. And again, you can just click join on the homepage for premium membership. I think it's $4.99 a month. But for premium members, we're doing a premium live stream. We do it once a month. We're doing it this Thursday, September 26th, 4 p.m. Eastern Time. And I will answer your questions. We do an entire session of Q&A. Pretty fun. Get to know each other a little bit better. Also, when you're a premium member, you can see the podcast. It's called the Stakscast. Great weekly podcast. Some amazing guests. So Jonathan Kahn, Amir Sarfati, people you love, but not only Israel, just like with the TV show, not only Israel, Middle East content, we talk about everything, things going on here in America, the culture, and more. So you want to check that as well. But a lot of good things happening. Hey, again, for such a time as this, we're staying very busy. 2 YouTube channels, the TV show, the podcast, and much more. So keep it right here. In these times where good is called evil and evil is called good, we will continue to cut through the clutter with the truth of God's word and the truth of what's really happening and why it affects you. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Keep Israel in your prayer right now. Pray for wisdom, boldness, and strength for Israel's leaders. Until tomorrow, God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace. Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an upload, and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video is posted. And don't forget to share your thoughts, insights, and comments below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow.